Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 7. Today, we're going to talk about pregnancy in the workplace after a prenatal diagnosis. So, depending on your work environment and work relationships, the workplace can be tricky. Tony and I know that both personally, for sure. In most cases, you're going to see coworkers for 40 hours a week, just like everyone else. But maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing this type of news with them. Or maybe you'd rather everyone know. We're going to discuss in this episode 5 points of communicating with your employer and coworkers. Hi everyone, this is Jeff and Tony Brabeck, the founders of Our Little Sparrows. We would love to know more about you, but if you want to know more about us, feel free to use the link in the description below. Welcome to episode 7 of our grief series, The Pregnancy Journey, grieving from diagnosis to the loss of your baby and beyond.
Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get alerts for when we post new content weekly. Stick around, we're starting right now.
All right, as we promised, we've got 5 points that we want to cover about communicating with your place of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, place of work. The first thing that you want to think about is why. Why should I even share? I think there's some good points to talk about there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and for me, one of the important reasons to share with my workplace is because it was easier for them to know. Now, I work in a place, at the time that we were pregnant, I worked in an office. It was a small office on a day when everybody was in. At the most, we probably had 12 people. So it was easier for me to share with them because I knew them well. And it was just easier for me if they knew, instead of them assuming everything was fine and me not saying anything. It just made it...
Because at some point, everyone's going to know.
Everyone's going to know. And for me, that's what I desired. Now, the tricky thing about my workplace is that even though we're a small office, we are a regional corporate office for a much larger company. Mm-hmm. So we have associates coming in that I don't see on a regular basis. Some of them know that knew that I was pregnant. And so it was tricky as to whether I should say something to them. Right. And sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. And it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to decide in that moment if you feel safe, if you feel that it is to your benefit for them to know, or if just to kind of leave it as is, and this, you keep it safe to yourself.
For me, it was completely different. I worked with a small mom and pop company at the time, subcontractor inside the convention center in downtown Sacramento. So for me, it was just my immediate IT and my installer, and I was the sales, front end sales for the subcontractor at the convention center. So to me, it was about personal relationships and about knowing that they have my best interest at hand and in mind, and that I know them and I trust them, right? So I was able to just tell my installer. It's just 2 of us in that location. It was easy for me to tell him and to put that trust in him. And then I decided to stop there. I did let my employer know, the owner of the company that lives in a whole other location of the state, but that was it. And I felt comfortable there. And not telling the staff of the convention center to me was fine. They obviously, I let, after Olivia passed, then, when that happened, then I let my IT manager know that he can let anyone know. Mm-hmm. And that, oh my gosh, talk about taking the pressure off of me having my own expectations of myself that aren't really fair about what that looks like, to go back and to start announcing this is what happened. I didn't have to, because I set out to have that done for me. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that, right? We talk about surrogates, or in this case, we talk about it in the form of a point person. So part of why to share, it's going to create a safe space for you. For some of you, you're going to want that safe space. For others, it's like, it doesn't matter to me, and that's fine. But we definitely think it creates a safe space to let people know at work ahead of time. We also believe that it can take the awkwardness right out. In other words, you can approach this with the frame of mind that things have already been set in motion one way or the other based on the actions you took um, to have done what you want done, right? So whatever that is, not telling everyone or telling everyone, it's gonna help take the awkwardness out of this tragic scenario or situation that our society is just not, it's ill prepared to even talk about if you haven't been through this situation yourself personally. The other thing is you want people to know.
Right.
In other words, like I said, my IT manager is someone that I knew and I trust with my emotions, with my personal information, and it's because we have that relationship on that level, that deeper level, than just a general coworker that I wanted him to know because it's that kind of tight relationship that I had with him.
Right.
The other thing would be if you need extra time off for appointments. I think, Tony, that's probably something you could speak to really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, I needed to let my immediate supervisor know and my HR person know, of course, what was going on. And I did need to take time off for our ongoing appointments. We had weekly appointments with our OB, and then we had every other week, we had another ultrasound. So, and that was actually like in downtown Sacramento, where we live in Roseville. So,
Right.
so that we would actually take like either the day off or half a day off, depending on the appointment. And so it was helpful for me to talk to my HR because then they were able to tell me what I could do and what was within the policy or what they were going to do just above and beyond our typical policy of taking time off. So, so you never know if you have an HR person or maybe you have a close relationship with your employer. It can help to be open and honest with your journey, and it gives them the opportunity to show what they can do within their typical policy, but also to go above and beyond and show you how they really care and support you. And I think I just want to go back a bit and just point. You said a key word or key phrase, and taking the pressure off. So that really resonated with me because there is a lot of pressure to, you know, kind of give the presence, or I'm not sure what the word is, but like that you're doing fine, you know.
Oh, it's like putting on a facade
Yeah,
or
facade
pretending.
and a pressure to like
Perform, right? It's your
perform and
job.
everything's okay.
Yeah.
When if you're able to share with people and
That it's not okay.
if you feel safe and you have a good relationship with people and that's they're people that you trust, it definitely takes that pressure off.
Yeah.
And allows them to support you too,
Right.
because even completing tasks like that you do just like that on a normal basis now might seem a little bit more difficult. You might have some concentration difficulties or maybe some forgetfulness that might happen due to everything that's happening.
Right.
Grief can
And
cause that.
we'll put a link above in the cards. We have part of an episode we talk about a grounding exercise that Tony actually was doing during some difficult times at work. It helped her to, center, get that balance back, and take the anxiousness level,
Yes.
Down a little bit. But
Yes.
we'll link that in the cards above, and you can go check that out. And we have a downloadable resource as part of our journal guide.
Right. And just to speak a little bit more to that, there will be times when you feel an overwhelming sense of emotion and you just might to go out and take a few minutes, like go for a walk or take an extra break, letting your immediate supervisor or someone that you work with closely know, or just say you're having a really difficult time right now and you just need to go and take a few minutes, and that is really helpful as well. So if they know, or at least in some generality know that there's a difficult situation that you're dealing with,
then they can support you.
They can support you by letting you take, if you need to go take a walk, if you're having some anxiety, you need to go and like maybe what I did was what I call a grounding exercise. Then that lets them know you're not just going out because you're trying to skip out on work. You actually are needing some actual time to like kind of ground yourself, center yourself in so that you can get back to work and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing we would talk about is, you go from, why should I share? That's kind of the big picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're like, okay, now we know why we want to share or why we don't want to share.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have to ask ourselves, when do I share? Do I share now that I've been diagnosed, or do I share after the baby is already after it's already done and over with, right? Whether the baby goes to term and is born alive or born stillborn or passes away after or later. I mean, there's so many different scenarios within the life limiting and a fatal diagnosis journey. So I mean that's a huge question. Is like,
Yeah.
when do I share?
Well, it's completely up to you
Mm-hmm.
and what is you're comfortable sharing. And for us, we shared right away with I did with my employers, and I believe you did with your coworker and boss. And that was what we felt we needed to do. We wanted them to understand the full situation and that there was a lot of factors that we didn't know what was going to happen. So we were playing it by ear. And
we didn't know how many weeks we had, how many days we had,
so
how
we
many
needed
hours.
them to be flexible with us in terms of us
Preparedness.
being prepared to take time off and so forth, and just letting them know. And so I was able to work ahead and get some things done and implemented so that I could pass it off to my coworker who's going to take over for me. And thankfully, I was actually able to do that before I went into labor.
I don't think you should feel pressured to do that either.
Right.
That was just your choice.
That was my choice, yes.
Right.
Yeah. So again, it's completely up to you
on when to tell,
when you want to share and how much you want to share.
Yeah.
Those come with different, pros and cons, and it's whatever is right for you. And you can, if you choose not to share right away, you don't have to stick to that through the whole duration of your pregnancy. You can share at any time.
Right.
So you can change your mind. And if you feel it best to share with someone, then that's totally up to you.
I mean, often we say, reevaluate, right? Take time to reevaluate and decide which direction to move in, and that could be a daily thing. Unfortunately, it's the journey. Yeah.
Okay, so we covered the first 2 points. Point 1, we talked about why should I share. Second point, we talked about when should I share. Let's talk about point 3. Who should I share with? We have a list of a few people we think are good places to start. Now, of course, this is all dependent on whether you feel comfortable and safe with these people to share with them your story, your journey. So, a fellow employee is someone maybe that you work closely with and you feel comfortable with. Your immediate supervisor, HR, if you have an HR, and if you have a good relationship with someone in your upper management.
Yeah, like a director, a VP, because they can handle, all the above. Obviously, HR is going to be private between you and HR, but your fellow employee, I mean, if it's like a friend of yours, your best friend, that's great because they're going to speak on your behalf on a personal level, more often than not. I can't say definitively, of course. They can also be considered your point person for work. You can have point people for different aspects of your personal life and your work life.
Yeah.
So
and we talked about point person in our last episode, in episode 5.
We'll link that in the cards above. But your immediate supervisor, it's nice because if you don't want the whole company to know, I mean, that's a key one that you can just have them talk to your group of people. I know for one of my jobs, we were in pods of 5, and the 5th person was our manager, our immediate supervisor. So that's more privatized. You just want your small group to know. That's always an option. HR, I mean, we talked about in the previous, when do I tell? Well, if you want to make it easy to get out the door, if you're not having a good day, if you want to make it easy to get to those appointments, like for me, I wanted to go to all the appointments with the OB and with the specialist once we got diagnosed. Um, if everyone who's in the loop that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
HR, some companies don't have HR. I
Mm-hmm.
personally did not have one at my company. Um, then you want to at least let HR know so that
Mm-hmm.
you can just say, "Hey, I got to go," and they don't even ask why
Mm-hmm.
half the
Yeah.
time. I mean, every company's different, but
Mm-hmm.
if they know, they're not typically going to ask. They're just going to say, "You got to go,
Yeah.
go."
Yeah. And I'm not even sure, depending on state laws, if they can really ask details about where you're
That's true.
going. So,
Maybe
I
I
mean,
thought they were being really
it's
cool,
up
but
to you
there's more
what you share
laws.
with them, and is up to you. I don't know how much they can ask you. So it's just dependent
Oh, right.
on
Yeah,
your
I
laws.
totally
Yeah.
agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. It's
I just thought of
you got to
that.
do what's
Hmm.
comfortable with you.
Yeah.
But I think the common or the same rule is going to apply. The more, and just take this, for a grain of salt, what I'm saying. For me personally, I know throughout my 42 years of life, um, and 22 years as an adult, let's put it that way. At 20, I actually grew up. I feel like the more that you can share with someone, the more they can be there for you,
Hmm.
right? Because
Hmm.
if people don't know, how can they how can they respond?
Hmm.
They can only respond the way they know how.
Yeah.
So the more they know,
Hmm.
the more opportunity you're giving them to respond on a
Hmm.
more personal level and deeper level
Hmm.
with your situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and upper management. We did talk about upper management.
Hmm.
It's a trickle down effect, right? If you can
Hmm.
talk to a director, if you can talk to a VP, because you have that personal
Hmm.
relationship, they're going to handle everything else for you,
Yeah.
except for HR.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do that part.
Right. And of course, that's you giving them permission to do all that. So, point 4, what would I share? Again, it's up to you what you want to share. Here's a couple questions you can ask yourself to help you what to share and how much to share. First question, you can ask yourself if it would be more helpful for you if people knew, or would it be more helpful if only a select group of people knew?
Hmm.
Those are definitely things to kind of filter through your mind,
Consider, yeah,
consider, and is it going to help you? Is it going to make things easier for you? Or is it just going to make things maybe more complicated or awkward at work?
right.
It's all dependent on your work
Hmm.
environment, your relationships with your coworkers and employers.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be honest here. There's discrimination. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're not saying this is happening in every workplace at every level
Mm-hmm.
throughout the country, but that's what we mean by this. You're the best judge for your company, and I mean the same goes for you. What you don't know about other people, you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
know until
You
you
share.
share, and then
Mm-hmm.
they react.
Mm-hmm.
So we do understand there is discrimination, the possibility thereof. So obviously
Mm-hmm.
that's why we're very cautious about telling you, you should do this. You
Mm-hmm.
should share with the director or
Mm-hmm.
VP. Or it's not you should, but these are just suggestions based on our experience and
Mm-hmm.
what we've been through with our jobs.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, you actually might be surprised. The more you start sharing your story with people, I think more people will come out of the woodworks and say, hey, actually, I know someone that had a similar experience, or
Totally.
my sister had, lost a baby.
Hmm.
And,
Gives
you're,
the opportunity for people to step up.
yeah. And all of a sudden you're having conversations with people about a subject that's not really talked about,
Right.
especially not in the workplace,
Hmm.
and with people you probably may
Never
not
thought.
had a
No.
conversation with before.
Right. Let
And
alone one like
so,
this.
and then you have all of a sudden a new group of support
Right.
people. So that could totally happen, and
Hmm.
that would totally be a blessing. It could happen the other way where people feel really uncomfortable and don't know how to respond. So,
Yeah. And don't respond the way that you would
yeah.
expect or like, for sure.
So it could happen either way, or you might get a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So there are different forms of sharing. Obviously, like we talked about before, you can go directly to a certain person in your company in addition to your HR department. Because regardless, at some point you are going to talk to HR. I mean, you're going to take maternity leave or bereavement. All that's going to definitely happen regardless. But there are more lines of communication that are available to you, especially nowadays. My goodness, with electronics, social media, digital era, it's not just pick up the phone or go to the office or go to your supervisor and start talking in person.
Yes. If I remember right, and I actually don't even quite remember, but I don't even remember if I phoned anybody at
Your
work.
HR.
I might have sent a text. Yeah. Definitely I sent an email to my HR.
Your HR was in San Diego.
Well, no, actually we had HR in our office.
The office
yeah,
at that time.
In my office. And so I knew her well and I felt comfortable sharing with her. And of course I knew that she would be able to help me in terms of what kind of benefits and things that I could take advantage of to help us through this our journey. And so she was very helpful in that aspect.
The larger the company, the more resources possibly available. So that's something to consider too.
Yes. Yeah. In some companies, like we have an EAP program, employee assistance program, which helped us, which allowed us to get actually counseling for free for X amount of sessions. So we didn't know that until, they told us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like reading the employee handbook. Who does that? Yeah.
So
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So initial ways of sharing with your coworkers or employers. I mean, phone and email. I sent a text.
It's normal now.
Yeah, and it's definitely, just depending on the relationship that you have with that person, what's appropriate and what is your comfortability. You could refer them also to, if you've chosen to share your story on a blog or on your social media, you can refer your coworkers and employer to view your social media and
regardless of how you initiate the conversation, you're probably always going to want to follow up with an email because that email is going to spell out what was discussed or what was in the first email, just announcing that this is happening. So, however you do that initial communication or conversation, I would bet it's going to always follow up with a formal email of this is
going on
and this is what I would like to be discussed or not discussed, shared or not shared, on and on.
Right.
I know we did a resource for how to tell family and friends, but we're actually going to do a modified resource for how to tell your work. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's a guide. It's not something that you should feel obligated to use. It's something just to kind of help you identify what are your needs, what do you need to let people know, and who are the people that you need to let know. And then you can also specify specific needs, like you're going to need time off for appointments, or anticipating the birth and also death of my baby. What does that entail? Unfortunately, those are conversations that are going to be had at some point.
It's hard to think of all these things. So if you're able to at least read through stuff that we either did or wish we would have done in the resource guide that we're going to provide, it's probably going to be enlightening because you're going to be like, oh my gosh, how would I have even thought about a simple question as XYZ?
Yeah.
So we just encourage you to at least gloss over it, take a look at it, or use it. That's what it's there for, as a resource. So communicating with everyone can easily seem overwhelming and tiring, as you probably discovered easily in this episode. So again, you get to decide who needs to know and how much you want to share with them. You set the tone for how you want your pregnancy experience to be like at your workplace. Most of all, we want you to know that you are not alone and that you are loved. Your baby will always be cherished. Our Little Sparrows is here to support you in any way that we can. There are great resources available to you, and we hope that we can be one of them. And don't forget to subscribe, ring that bell, and if you can, give us a thumbs up so that others can find these episodes.
If you liked what you saw in this video, click on the next video in this grief series here. You can also click on our weekly video podcast here.